Hi, I'm Dan, and my I realize this is going to be something of a talking head type of a situation here. Um, still hope that it's going to be beneficial. So my goal is to address some topics that come up frequently in D&D when I'm playing or DMing, both in person and online. And So I intend to make a series of relatively short videos. I expect them to be around 5 minutes apiece that will address these frequent topics in a succinct manner and will help add clarity both in the metagame as well as in game mechanics. So the first thing that I wanted to address is style of play, because while there's a lot of agreement on kind of the overall view of what Dungeons and Dragons is, and you can see it in things like Stranger Things or Big Bang Theory. The truth is that at at the session there are basically four different ways to play the game. Um, the original intent of Dungeons and Dragons back in the 1970s was to be a set of rules to govern miniatures tabletop combat. Although very quickly, like immediately, it was very clear that really miniatures were going to play a very small part in those earlier iterations of Dungeons and Dragons. It really wasn't until 2003.5 that miniatures on a battle map became a significant part of Dungeons and Dragons. There were other fantasy games like Warhammer 40K or that were very much centric to miniatures on a battle map. Dungeons and Dragons was not one of them. Dungeons and Dragons was much more of a theater of the mind. Very, you would occasionally use dice on, some sort of a terrain representation to like a graph paper type thing to to clarify the theater of the mind, but it really was more of a theater of the mind type situation. But still, uh, particularly since 3.5, there's a significant population of D&D players that really do focus on the game as miniatures on a battle map, and online play very heavily skews in that direction because of the nature of things like Roll20 and Fantasy Grounds are very much geared towards having tokens uh, moving around on a graphical battle map. The other thing that you see a lot, particularly in new live play, is viewing Dungeons and Dragons as essentially a dice rolling game, where the focus of the game is to engineer situations where players are rolling dice for, making lots of insight checks and deception checks and knowledge checks of various kinds. Any excuse to roll the dice so that you can get a reaction to a 20 or to a 1. Um, and uh, and those players will either move on to a more advanced style of play, or they will leave the game. It's that the just seeing D&D as a dice rolling game is just not going to maintain a person's interest for a lot. There are lots better. There are lots. If you're looking for to roll dice, play Yahtzee. I mean, it's a much better game. Or Bunko. It's a better social experience. Yeah, D&D as a dice rolling game is a good starting point, but players need to evolve past that, or they are going to leave the game. Then what we see a lot, particularly in representations like Stranger Things or Big Bang Theory, or not so much Community. Community did a good job of conveying collaborative storytelling, but it is and we see this in organized play, like Adventure League, is the game as as the DM's narrative, and the players and the PCs are kind of along for the ride. Players can find hooks into that narrative, things that are entertaining or slants for them. But really, the outcome is not going to be incumbent. Is not going to be determined by the player's choices. It's the narrative is going to roll through regardless of what the players do. I mean, that's just the way that those type of large scale organized play campaigns are. I mean, Adventure League has thousands of different groups playing the same adventure, and you can't have every one of those thousands have different outcomes and have a coherent story continuing on, right? The lead writers and designers of those campaigns, they know where that story is going, and it's and they design their modules for that, but the players are really just kind of along for the ride. You also see that Wallowitz, he knows the story that he's presenting to the other members of the Big Bang Theory cast, and they may have some interesting characters who are along for the ride, but the characters are really not going to change where Wallowitz is going with that story. It is his story, and he's telling it. And that can be entertaining, particularly if you have a very charismatic DM who's able to spin a good story, do a lot of voice acting along the way. And you see a lot of this, a lot of the DM narrative across the board. It may be the most common style of DM, like mainly because there are so many participants in organized play compared to a home game. But what we get to is what if you look at people who play the game for decades, what they aspire to is this collaborative storytelling, where the DM is presenting the backdrop, but really the driving force, the thing that is building the narrative are the PCs and the players who are making those decisions for those PCs. And that is a compelling thing. That can lead to D&D sessions that are memorable across the lifetime. I like I said, I began playing in 1977, and there are people who I played with in at that time whenever I was just a teenager, and there are sessions that we have that we had back then that still come up in conversation when we have reunions to this day. The collaborative storytelling model is just a powerful tool. It is what really, I don't want to say good because that's such a judgmental, but it's what really experienced um, and top-notch DMs aspire to. They want players to have a lot of agency. They want them to be the ones who are really constructing the story, and the DM is really providing enabling mechanisms for that. And so if you look at some of the really high-end streamed campaigns, like Matt Mercer's Critical Role or Acquisitions Incorporated, where you have Chris Perkins. So first of all, the DM is contributing a lot, but it is not just a DM narrative. Right? The DM is presenting a very well developed environment, but it is really the players with their characters that are building the story with their decisions. And that is wholly entertaining for every player in the game, as well as the DM, and as we now know, to spectators. So that is what I obviously recommend is trying to find a good group where you can engage in collaborative storytelling as the style of play that is going on at your game. I think probably the next topic I'm going to go over is the idea of battle mats or miniature combat and a very initiative heavy game versus theater of the mind, because that ties directly into the collaborative storytelling style of play. Um, if you find this video helpful, which I hope you do, I hope you'll give it a quick like, subscribe to the channel. Maybe I don't know how frequently I'll get these little bullets out, but I would like to get it out maybe even a couple a week.